What is up, YouTube? It is Raphael here from xxRafael Productions, and it is absolutely no doubt that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is one of the most successful movie franchises ever. Now, they have had a lot of great movies throughout the years. We had Captain America trilogy, the Iron Man trilogy, and now, and for this particular video, we will be ranking the best Avengers movies, now from worst to best. Now, that's not to say that any of them are actually bad films, but let's go ahead and take the time to compare, contrast, and see which Avengers movie is the best out of the four. So we're gonna go from Avengers 1 from 2012 all the way up to Avengers Endgame, and I'm gonna be discussing my own reasons why, but also if you disagree, you can also comment down below as well. It'll be appreciated. You can also try to sway my opinion if you wish. Also, if you have the time, please check my website down below. It is dedicated to my YouTube channel. But let's go ahead and let's start with the first one, which is going to be... Now, for the last place, we have Avengers 2012 and Avengers Age of Ultron from 2015. So you may be wondering now, why do I have these two movies put together? That is because I actually feel like these two movies are a tie in terms of quality and entertainment. Now, don't get me wrong, when I first watched both movies, like my very first time watching it back in Australia, I actually ranked Avengers 1 a bit above Age of Ultron, but recently I've been doing a rewatch of all the movies during this coronavirus quarantine, and I have finally come to the conclusion, because I've wanted to make this video for a while now, but I've wanted to go ahead and rewatch them again just to get a better feel of each movie. And I finally come to the conclusion that they are actually ties. So I was a bit too hard before on Age of Ultron, but I actually think it is on par with the first Avengers movie. Now, I'll get into my reasons right now. So let's start again with the first Avengers movie. So it did a terrific job at bringing all these heroes together on the big screen. This is something that DC needs to improve on. Instead of rushing, basically, they need to kind of give each character development, which Marvel successfully did. Again, no diss on DC overall, but I'm just telling about what Avengers did so great, and that is why. So we had the villain, like Loki, the villain of Avengers 1, basically. He is Thor's brother. You all know that, obviously, but we are then set up to the overall bigger plan, which is Thanos, which is teased in a mid-credit scene, right? So we have already a compelling storyline that has been set up for the rest of the future MCU movies, starting from 2012 all the way up to 2019. Let's go ahead and talk about the storyline itself, which is not really much to write home about, but the way these characters interact, their chemistry and all that stuff, they're what make the movie worthwhile to watch. And the actors themselves are a delight as well to see on screen, especially Robert Downey Jr., Chris Hemsworth, and even the villain, Tom Hiddleston, his Loki's actor. I mean, pretty much, like, I haven't actually seen any bad actors in there, so if I left any of them out, just don't get the wrong idea. But that'll just take too much time to list everybody, but I'm just listing the ones that really did the best. But then again, just keep in mind, I'm not dissing on anyone's acting. Alright? So their scenes are good. This movie is also directed by Joss Whedon, the same person who directed Age of Ultron, and that is a contrast from the next two Avengers movies, Infinity War and Endgame, which are directed by the Russo brothers, rather than Joss Whedon. Now let's go ahead and talk about the final fight, which, once again, they have made it one of the most iconic scenes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because that paved the way for many MCU films going forward as well. Age of Ultron's Battle of Sokovia is pretty much actually the same in terms of quality. I mean, I know some people complained about it being a rehash, but I honestly didn't see the problems. In fact, Age of Ultron actually did many things a lot better than the first Avengers movie, which I think many people just had their expectations initially set too high because of the trailers being misleading. But Ultron himself, once you look past the misleading trailers, he's not actually a bad villain overall. I mean, certainly not as good as Loki, but I mean, that's subjective, okay? But if you look at, like, Tony Stark's personality traits and you compare them to Ultron, who is said to be made by Bruce Banner and Tony Stark, right? Now, it makes complete sense why he's quite goofy, but the good thing about it is they don't lean too hard into the comedy aspects of it. So you have him while occasionally spitting out jokes, but they're mostly dark comedies, so it kind of still makes him menacing anyway. So it was an overblown issue in my opinion when I rewatched it. It actually didn't really detract too much overall. So like I said before, I wanted to rewatch all of these movies before making this review, just so I can get a better feel of it, and that is a good thing because I was able to appreciate them more on a rewatch. Now, that is not to say that any of these movies are terrible, because none of them really are. None of them are actually bad, but when it comes to the 4 Avengers movies, some are just better than others. But keep that in mind, okay? So for the last place, we have Avengers 1 and Avengers Age of Ultron. The actual color grading in Age of Ultron is kind of better, because in Avengers 1 there were some scenes that looked really flat, whereas many scenes in Age of Ultron popped out, and it was a visually pleasing experience to the eye as well. But then again, we have Age of Ultron now. I've been talking about Avengers 1, but let's go ahead and talk about Age of Ultron, and that is because I actually liked the way it set up the future MCU movies. Like, I think the reason why it wasn't as initially well received is because it was released way ahead of its time. Like, if you have seen the future movies, you might have felt at first that Age of Ultron was clunked with unimportant plot points, but in reality, in the big picture, if you look at the big picture, you will see that Age of Ultron is actually very, very important to the future MCU movies. Like, it set up Thor's journey to Infinity Stones, it foreshadowed Infinity War, it foreshadowed Thor Ragnarok as well, and also it set up Hulk in Sakaar in Thor Ragnarok. It showed how he got, well, it didn't show how he got there, but it showed where he was last at. So, like I'm saying before, you might have liked or hated Age of Ultron, but you certainly cannot deny its importance to the MCU as a whole, and that is what I feel it is better to rewatch it after you have seen all the Phase 3 movies, because this movie aged like wine. That's the best way I can describe it. Now, let's go ahead and move on to the Russo brothers directed movies, which I feel are far superior to Joss Whedon's movies overall, but let's go ahead and bring up my next movie, and that is Avengers Endgame, my second best favorite MCU movie of all time. So we cannot deny how much of a success Endgame was. Like, it is actually topped Avatar, which obviously most people have known already by this point. It has topped Avatar as the highest grossing movie worldwide in the box office, so that is an undeniable achievement for the MCU as a whole and Marvel. So yes, people working behind this movie, they can give themselves a pat in the back. Now, like I said before, however, this is a damn near perfect movie, but at the same time there are also flaws that I'd like to point out. But let's go ahead and get into the good parts first, just to be optimistic. Now, the final fight. I actually felt like Infinity War's battle on Titan was a bit better because of less crowded people. Like, it's less crowded, and also the way that they set the battle scene up, which, as I said before, I think I said in my other one that the Russo brothers did better when it comes to small scale action, like compared to the big scale, because they're able to combine each hero's attacks in creative ways, and that is actually more fun to watch rather than simply huge armies punching each other. But even then, this battle was amazing because it pretty much felt earned, like the previous Marvel movies, and then we have it all culminating up to this moment, and it is just awesome. I mean, you cannot deny Captain America lifting Mjolnir in the final fight literally had my theater turning into a stadium. It was that epic. But that's enough about the final fight first, since we're going to talk about the movie itself as a whole, which, it started off great. We had a Hawkeye and his family, I believe. Yeah, it was Hawkeye and his family who were in some kind of park before Thanos did his reckoning on the universe, and they actually got snapped away, save for Hawkeye, right? So that was an interesting opening sequence and set the tone for this movie. Then we cut straight to Tony being in space, being rescued, etc. by Captain Marvel. Now, around this time is like when they go ahead and do what none of us expected. Well, maybe some people expected it, but I certainly did not predict this would happen. They literally subverted all expectations and straight up destroyed 2018 Thanos in like the opening scene. So it was clear to me that the Endgame, the ones who made Endgame, the writers and Russos, they definitely were trying to make it as unpredictable as possible, which it was a good thing because I've seen many fan theories about it, and it's good some of them didn't come true because it would have been extremely predictable. However, most of the problem, in my opinion, lies somewhere in the middle because of all the comedy, which I think, by the way, that it would have worked overall. Like the comedy themselves is not forced, but it just kind of felt out of place because of how dark the situation is supposed to be. So Thanos just snapped, and they have a 5-year time jump, which, by the way, the 5-year time jump I have mixed feelings on because of many character arcs being skipped, like Professor Hulk, Fat Thor, which, I mean, I know the Fat Thor, I'm not really ranting about it because I know that is how it's supposed to be like after all the stuff that Thor went through, but that is unfortunately undermined by the amount of comedy they have put into the film. So we have Professor Hulk, right? We have been wondering how he would get his revenge against Thanos after his pathetic showdown in Infinity War. And I know I made a video before about Hulk being ruined in this movie, which I have linked in the description below, so if you want to see that. I made it last year when I first saw Endgame. But, like I said before, he did do some good things, like he did kind of reverse the snap, and he did carry Avengers headquarters by himself, but that is all he did. I mean, he didn't really do anything. Like, I wanted to see the Hulk, like, that we all know and love, like, the Hulk that smashed Loki, who destroyed Ultron, who fought the Hulkbuster, who even damaged Surtur. Like, that is the Hulk we all wanted to see, but unfortunately in Endgame, we are not going to get any of that. As a matter of fact, he doesn't actually do any fighting in this movie, save for punching a few of Thanos' minions, so they can see why Hulk fans may be a little bit let down by that, and that is one of the main reasons why I put this below Infinity War, aside from the rest of the issues I'm about to say. Well, I would say something like at least give us a few flashbacks of how that came to be, but they skipped over that, so I'll add that as a sin in this movie. And there were just too many plot conveniences as well, like Ant-Man being freed by a goddamn rat, or Thanos destroying the Avengers headquarters so much to the point that it literally blew up, but Hawkeye and War Machine and Rocket all survived. Like, it's just so over the top, and I wasn't buying it. That was just too much for me to suspend my disbelief on. Now, like, Hawkeye literally didn't have a scratch on him when I first saw the scene. I have to probably rewatch it, but he didn't look injured at all, which is a surprise, because he literally the building was straight up destroyed by those missiles. Okay, so the character development in this film, the highlights are Nebula, obviously. Captain America and Tony Stark, they kind of glossed over. This is another problem. They kind of glossed over the Civil War conflict on this. I mean, I know that he snapped at Captain America in the beginning of the movie, but it's just, I don't know, like they didn't really show too much about it during the 5-year time jump, which, I mean, is to be fair because this movie was already 3 hours long, but oh man, did it feel like they missed out on a lot of stuff. Now, the time traveling aspect, it didn't really take away from the movie. It actually was fun to see the previous MCU movies as well, like Guardians in 2014, or even Avengers 1 in 2012, and The Dark World in 2013. So one of the best parts about it is when Thor realizes he's worthy to still wield Mjolnir. That was probably like the highlight of Thor's character in this entire movie. That's probably his best scene, being able to wield it. So that kind of makes the Thor fans a little more excited for what is about to come, right? So we have Stormbreaker, and now we have Mjolnir, which, I mean, a good question though is how how Captain America is going to return the Reality Stone inside Jane Foster. I wonder how he'll do that, but the movie kind of glosses over that as well, like how would he return the Soul Stone, because the Soul Stone is acquired through a sacrifice, not stolen, right? So I guess that means that he'll just have to toss it in the pond, and Red Skull is already free because Hawkeye got the Soul Stone. So does Red Skull get returned, or like does he stay in Vormir forever? I mean, like, bunch of questions that I can't be bothered to state because it'll take way too long. But if we go ahead and talk about the tone of the film, it is quite inconsistent, but I think they do a good job overall with many other aspects, so I won't really complain too much about the tone. It doesn't take away from the film or add anything to it. Just definitely felt like they should have shown more of the world after the 5-year disaster. But anyway, now we have future phase 4 movies being set up as well, with Thor joining the Asgardians, which he kind of gave his role as king to Valkyrie, which is kind of baffling, but I did research it at first, but then it turns out that we already have a character arc of him being the person he wants to be rather than the person he should be, so I guess that kind of works out. I can't say I'm 100% satisfied, but okay, whatever they wanted to say. Now, Captain Marvel, it's a good thing they didn't use her too much. Like, I mean, I know people were complaining that she was overpowered, but they actually did her really good in this movie. Like, they had her show off her immense power, but they didn't have her detract from the original 6 Avengers, so I guess that's a good thing about it. Like, if this movie was meant to be focused on the original 6, since this is their last movie, they did a good job. I didn't really feel like anything detracted too much, so I don't really understand the Captain Marvel hate, but whatever. So let's go ahead and go right into my next one. The Avengers Infinity War, released in 2018. This is definitely, without a doubt, my favorite Avengers movie. Endgame is second place to Infinity War. I mean, it's not bettered by too much, but this is slightly edges out Endgame, and I'll explain why. So, right from the bat, we are already given Thanos as a very menacing villain, as he beat up the Hulk and Thor without any Infinity Stones, right? So that set up the movie for a tone of dread and anticipation. Also, I feel like it was much more unpredictable because Endgame, we already knew all the heroes would win, so even if any situation looks dire for our heroes, it was pretty obvious Thanos will be beaten. So in this movie, we were very curious to see how he would be destroyed, which they delivered pretty much the most shocking ending of the entire MCU, with him actually winning and snapping half of all life out of existence. As for Thanos himself, I think he was better in this movie because he had more character development from 2014 Thanos all the way to 2018, which, like I said before, the emotional stakes in this movie were kind of wasted in Endgame because Scarlet Witch against Thanos in that movie was terrific, but it was against a 2014 Thanos who doesn't even know who she is, so that kind of summarizes some of my problems with the final fight. They have literally no connection to this other version of Thanos, which 2018 Thanos did pretty much everything that Endgame Thanos didn't do. Like, we had him go into different plans, right? I mean, he actually is not as brutal in this movie because he wants everyone to die fairly by the snap, but he still felt more intimidating because he is literally an unstoppable force in this movie, and it was just a delight to watch. Let's go with Captain America first of all. Let's go ahead and talk about him. Like, we had Captain America in the Wakanda, and he didn't have as much screen time as Iron Man did in this movie, but they did good with him because even if he didn't have enough screen time, he still had some very good scenes, like when he tried to stop 5-Stone Thanos at the end, and it kind of shows Thanos' reaction being like, I guess kind of annoyed, but at the same time respect how Cap is pretty much so brave to the point that he goes up against a Titan with 5 Infinity Stones by that point. And yeah, so that kind of gives you a whole respect for Captain America, which again he proves in Endgame when he goes up against Thanos' army. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Black Order in this movie. We have Ebonimo, Corvus Glaive, Proxima Midnight, and I think the Black Dwarf, Cull Obsidian. Let's talk about them because I think they were done much better in Infinity War compared to Endgame because they actually had some impressive feats. Like, we had Maw straight up defeating Doctor Strange, who later on puts up pretty much one of the best fights in the entire MCU, which I'll get into that later when I talk about the battle on Titan. But we had these people who like Vision against what's his name, Corvus Glaive, and Proxima against Scarlet Witch, and we had Cull Obsidian just being an unstoppable like threat in general in the Wakanda fight. They were done much better despite having such little screen time. So like I said before, they were able to squeeze in many different plot points in Infinity War, and not all of them felt as bloated as Endgame did, which is impressive because Infinity War had a lot of plots to juggle around, and it did so masterfully. That is good directing, good writing, and the acting as well definitely helped it out. Let's go ahead and talk about Vision, which I feel like people who are hating on Vision for being too weak in this movie, they are just kind of forgetting how Corvus Glaive basically disrupted his powers by stabbing him in that fight in Europe. I forgot, Scotland it is, yeah. They were fighting him in Scotland, and that is how Vision got nerfed. So it's not like the Russos just nerfed him just because. They actually gave a reason to. So that's really, that overall point about him, this being a negative, doesn't really hold up if you look at the bigger picture. Scarlet Witch, well, not much to say about her here, but she did kind of show how powerful she was when she held back Thanos while destroying an Infinity Stone. That is no minor feat. And we had Thanos being kind of humanized in this movie, which was a unique approach because if you look at the Guardians of the Galaxy or even Avengers 1, he was absolutely ruthless. So it was good to see another side of him, which I feel again they kind of wasted in Endgame. But let's talk about how Star-Lord, because Star-Lord screwed up in the Titan fight. People were complaining about it as well because of they could have beat him there, but that is actually consistent with his character, as he did the same thing when he blew up Ego in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. So even though people may have been outraged, and it is understandable, but it is not really a plot hole or whatever, because it is consistent with Star-Lord's personality as they have set up in previous movies. As for Thor's journey to, well, I think Thor, in my opinion, had, along with Iron Man, was one of the best characters in Infinity War. Doctor Strange, Iron Man, and Thor, those are like my top three in this movie. Hulk getting beaten up in the first scene was a bit of a surprise, but as like I said before, he was set up for a payoff in Endgame, which I guess was less than satisfactory, but whatever. So Hulk himself didn't get much to do, but I liked how it showed that Bruce Banner had to do it all by himself this time without using the Hulk for help. So I guess that did give Bruce some time to develop as well in this movie. That was a very good idea. Let's talk about the Guardians, like the way they met the Avengers and all that. Like all that stuff was done great. We had the pacing of this movie was great. I mean, compared to the other three Avengers movies, Infinity War had damn near perfect pacing. It had twists. It had very less filler. The plot was moving at a rapid pace. It was just amazing. I mean, I had no problems with the pacing. Like, I know I said Endgame had some in the middle, but Infinity War pretty much didn't have. So every scene you see in this movie is important, and none of it feels like time wasted. So they pretty much wasted no time when getting to the best parts. Which, let's go ahead and go straight into the Battle of Wakanda, and conversely the battle on Titan as well. The Wakanda fight now, like I said before, the Russos do better on small scales, which I think that it applies perfectly here, because the Wakanda fight was hyped up in the trailers, and I would say that it was great as well, but I think that they could have done much better with it, because Wakanda is an advanced nation, so they definitely have more than just foot soldiers, right? Like their strategy and their tactics were not utilized as much as I'd wanted, but then again, they made up for it with Thor's epic entrance. So like I said before, any so-called issue in this movie, it's been made up by many other epic scenes. So like we had a Hulkbuster making a return, which is a delight, and some of the best parts of the Wakanda fight were when Thor arrived, and also when Thanos himself arrived. Like the Like I said before, Thanos in this movie felt more unstoppable, and that was conveyed a lot better when he actually arrived and was swatting away everyone effortlessly. Like, the stakes were higher than ever in Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. That's why, what I like about those two movies the most. Now, what kind of puts Infinity War slightly above is Thanos himself and the pacing and the fight scenes. That is what kind of puts it slightly above. But when it comes to character development, Endgame is slightly better on that. And also, the endings were satisfying for some of the characters, but it still left a lot more out, so that's why I didn't really rank it as much as Infinity War did. But like I said before, let's stop wasting time. Let's go ahead and talk about the final fights now. The Titan fight. Oh my god. That was like the peak of MCU stuff. That fight was just amazing. Like, we had like the best CGI in a while. Like, Thanos' facial expressions were very realistic, which is surprising because he's a purple alien. But wow, I mean, they really did a good job with him. And then we had the heroes combining each of their abilities in creative ways. And also Spider-Man, and Iron Man, and Doctor Strange were pretty much the highlights of that fight scene. Now, I also liked how much like it felt like a comic book in some scenes. Like when, I think mostly during the Doctor Strange fight against Thanos, like a lot of that felt like it was straight out of a comic book, which is a good thing because holy hell, that was amazing. It didn't look fake at all. Like, I mean, most of it was CGI, but it looked realistic, surprisingly, and I can say doesn't really hold up for a lot of movies, including some of the MCU movies, but they straight up did some of the best CGI I've seen in a while in this movie. Iron Man vs. Thanos, again, this was hyped up for 6 years now because of his last appearance in 2012. We had Tony's whole paranoia, PTSD, all culminated onto this fight scene, and it was amazing. I mean, like, obviously we know that Iron Man cannot beat him, but I mean, it was still a good thing to see how far he had come along with that amazing Mark 50 suit, and he actually drew blood, which actually drew a lot of cheers in my theater when I was watching it. And, what else should I talk about? So, in terms of the lighting in that scene, something I'd say about Endgames is the lighting was way too dark in the final fight, which in this movie, it's a good thing that it wasn't. It was actually more aesthetically pleasing to see as well. Aside from the fight scenes being better in general, the actual visuals were done much better here because, I mean, I know that it was nighttime on that final fight in Endgame, but it was just way too much. Like, it was way too dark in some scenes, like, compared to here. And the color schemes in Titan compared to Wakanda, I like the contrast as well. There were some parts that seemed too gray, but not too obvious, so it's not really too much of a sin. But let's go ahead and talk about the ending now. Because the ending was unlike any superhero movie I had seen. It was like bleak. It was so we had bleak. What else? It had you anticipating for the next one because you could see how all the heroes put forth their best effort, like their absolute best, and it wasn't enough. And you combine that with the fact that Thanos himself was a very likable villain, it just culminated into what was probably one of the best endings I had ever seen as well. And all the heroes fading away as and Captain America losing hope, which we rarely see, just makes Thanos all that much better. Right? So I mean, come on, like, think about it. Like, if you think back onto those kind of scenes, you could see the tension. You could like cut it with a knife. It was that high, and that is something that the Russo brothers did, and it was just like this result. It led to pretty much one of the best MCU movies, and in my opinion, the best Avengers movie. And that is it. And that is it, folks. So that is my Avengers movie ranking. First place is Infinity War, second place is Endgame, and Avengers 1 and Avengers 2 are tied for last place. If you agreed, please sure to like and subscribe, or if you disagree, you can also comment down below why, and I will be sure to take your opinions into account. I will do probably some more later on, like when I rank the trilogy of Captain America or Iron Man's trilogy, or even Thor's. But just comment down below which other Marvel movie you want me to talk about, and I will get around to doing it. So I will see you all in my next video. I've actually got some AP exams coming up as well, and I'm excited to do them. I will have some more videos released in the summer, so please stay tuned, and I will see you all next time. Goodbye.